immediately claims central influence, opening diagonals for the queen and bishop. Unlocking potential on the king side, this knight gracefully prepares for a dynamic central presence. Asserting central control, this advance immediately contests black's knight and prepares to expand on the queen side, creating a robust pawn structure. Opening the diagonal for the bishop sets a solid, albeit slightly passive, foundation for the queen side. Developing the knight efficiently now pressures the center and prepares for kingside castling. The bishop now pins the knight, creating an immediate tactical knot and demanding white's careful attention to the central tension. Securing the center and preparing for queenside development solidifies white's pawn structure, while black's bishop is now somewhat restricted. Asserting central presence, black challenges white's pawn structure directly. Disrupting the bishop's influence, this pawn thrust forces a decision, potentially weakening the queenside structure. Sacrificing bishop pair now simplifies, aiming for easier development rather than a positional grind. Doubling pawns now grants the c-file for your rook, but at the cost of a slightly awkward pawn structure, potentially creating a weakness. Challenging the central pawn structure immediately disrupts white's harmony, aiming for active counterplay. Breaking the central tension opens the c-file for your rook, promising aggressive piece play. Opening the center d-file now allows for dynamic piece play, but be mindful of your king's safety in the ensuing skirmish. Developing the bishop to a more active square, eyeing the king side and clearing the d-file, is a solid positional step. Securing the monarch on the king side initiates a crucial phase, prioritizing king safety before venturing into central skirmishes. Developing the knight to a more central square, preparing to castle and solidify the kingside defenses, anticipating potential pawn breaks. Preparing to expand the queenside and challenge the central pawn structure, aiming to unblock the queenside bishop. Fortifying the king's sanctuary by castling now prioritizes safety before developing an offensive strategy. Unleashing the bishop to eye the queenside, black aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and seize the initiative. Trading the bishop removes a key defender of black's queenside pawns, opening lines for white's pieces. Reclaiming the pawn with the knight opens up the queenside for counterplay and challenges white's central control. This bishop now eyes the queenside majority, a promising outpost to exert pressure. Positioning the queen to eye the weakened queenside pawn structure, while preparing for potential queenside expansion, seems like a logical step. Propelling that pawn forward contests crucial queenside territory and restricts black's bishop development. Committing the rook to the open e-file asserts control and prepares for potential central breakthroughs. Chasing black's bishop to the rim with the queen now aims to control the central files and potentially create attacking chances on the queen side. Seeking a foothold, black initiates a pawn thrust to disrupt white's queenside coordination and potentially open diagonals for the bishop. Shifting queenside pressure, white aims to disrupt black's pawn chain and potentially exploit the c4 weakness. Rerouting the knight to its natural square is a logical step, aiming to bolster the queenside and potentially launch a counterattack. Reinforcing the central pawn chain and preparing for a potential kingside pawn storm by clearing the e-file for rook activity. Developing the knight to its natural square now aims to contest the central squares, potentially preparing to challenge white's queen. Gaining space on the kingside and preparing a potential pawn storm is the immediate goal, opening avenues for piece activity. A provocative knight sortie aims to disrupt white's queenside structure and potentially eye weak squares. Solidifying the kingside pawn structure anticipates a central pawn push, creating a defensive barrier. Releasing the pinned knight, this infiltration aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and create attacking chances on the queenside. Unleashing a central pawn, storm breaks the cramped position and challenges the black knight's dominion. Snatching that pawn offers a material advantage, but exposes your queen to immediate counterplay and opens lines for white's pieces. Unleashing pawn tension, This advance seizes central territory and aims to disrupt black's queenside coordination. This maneuver seeks to dislodge the invading knight, aiming to reopen lines for your rooks and potentially exploit white's slightly weakened queenside pawn structure. Securing the queen allows white to eye the d7 knight and prepare a kingside push. A proactive attempt to build a pawn chain, preparing for potential kingside advances or a firmer foothold in the center. Initiating a pawn storm aims to break through black's blockade and create weaknesses. This pawn push aims to secure space on the queenside, but opens a dangerous diagonal towards the king. Liberating the queen's rook now, eyeing that isolated d pawn for potential counterplay. Unleashing the knight to a dynamically strong outpost, preparing to contest the crucial central files. Exploiting the doubled pawn's weakness, white aims to shatter black's queenside pawn structure. Seizing the open file immediately offers counterplay and disrupts white's central control, forcing a positional concession. Reclaiming the central file solidifies white's control and prepares a decisive kingside assault. Re-establishing the rook's presence on the open file, black seeks to pressure white's vulnerable pawn structure. Unlocking the open queen's rook file, this maneuver brilliantly targets black's exposed king. The exchange on e6 grants white open files and eases their rook's pressure on the now vulnerable kingside. Unlocking the semi-open file creates immediate pressure on black's queen and potentially opens a pathway for your rooks. Securing the monarch initiates the king's long journey to safety amid the shattered pawn structure. Shifting the queen aggressively to attack the passed pawn threatens to open a dangerous diagonal. Consolidating your forces is paramount now, bringing that knight into the fray to bolster your queenside defenses. Shifting the queen aggressively seeks to exploit the weakened dark squares around black's king. Consolidating the queen to defend the weakened kingside pawns becomes paramount after this. Unlocking the queen's diagonal with the bishop suddenly presents a clear pathway for attack. A bold capture that opens lines but exposes the queen to danger. Snatching initiative with a daring king hunt after the queen blunder, aiming to exploit the open lines towards black's exposed monarch. Surrendering the king's defenses to capture the knight, this choice cripples black's already precarious king's safety. Unleashing a devastating discovered check, white forces the king into an exposed, perilous central square. The black king, now utterly exposed, flees a deadly discovered attack amidst white's overwhelming initiative. Liberating the queen to unleash a devastating discovered attack against the king's shattered defenses. The king's position, now exposed, faces immediate tactical threats from the unleashed pieces. Unleashing the passed pawn towards promotion, this move seeks to exploit the exposed enemy king and force a favorable endgame. Exposing the black king with a check is the only way to delay the inevitable material loss and potential mate. Unleashing the king defensively, a crucial maneuver to dodge checks and prepare a counterattack. Exposing the king with a desperate check, a final gamble to disrupt white's crushing advantage. Relocating the king to this square is a bold attempt to escape the immediate checkmating threats while positioning for a potential counterplay. Seeking to exploit the open kingside, this offering aims to disrupt white's coordination and potentially expose their monarch further. Revealing the king's sanctuary to the enemy bishop's gaze at this juncture risks creating a devastating mating net. Unleashing a desperate final gambit, this piece seeks to stir chaos around white's suddenly exposed monarch. Exposing the king to open lines now is a desperate gamble, but perhaps it's the only way to avoid being suffocated. Black's monarch is dangerously exposed. This immediate check is a desperate attempt to buy time. Maintaining king's safety is paramount, even with the opponent's queen out of play. A slight oversight here could be disastrous. Black's king is exposed, forcing checks to prevent immediate checkmate as white hunts for the queen. Unleashing the king's pawn creates a dangerous new threat against the exposed black monarch. Unleashing a desperate counterattack, black hopes to disrupt white's royal promenade and avoid immediate checkmate. The king's desperate flight path offers no sanctuary from the relentless queen and pawn assault.